Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Parents Forum for Meaningful Education and Primus Books, I welcome you all who have gathered here to remember Mrs. Kusum Jain and celebrate her life. Shrimati Kusum Jain, a multifaceted and multidimensional personality, extremely versatile and perfectionist to the core, left us 5 months ago. Today being her birthday, the day has been chosen to pay homage to her through fond memories and release her book on Khichdi. Before we start the program, I would briefly introduce the speakers of the evening from different fields associated with Kusumji and her work. Professor Pushpesh Pant, food historian, former Professor JNU, Shri P.S. Sharda, Advocate, Delhi High Court, Mrs. Manjari Gopal, Vice President, PFME, and former Associate Professor, University of Delhi, Ms. Aparna Kalra, eminent journalist associated with Mint and Reuters, Professor Pulkit Mathur, Head of Food and Nutrition and Food Technology Department of Lady Irwin College. May I request the worthy speakers to kindly take the seats on the dais, please. Thank you. Kusumji was a great nature lover, conscious of environment-related issues, a true Rasik who appreciated fine arts and music, a crusader who fought against inhuman practices against students in schools, and a lot more. All this will be shared by her son, Mr. Sugat Jain. May I request Mr. Jain to come in, please.
For me personally, it's not easy to, even try to summarize the person she was and the way she touched the lives of everyone around her and society at large. She was a very, very unique person. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but I will say something which can link to her personality in very many different ways. Dal mein kuch kala hai. So as a kid, I would often run to her कि मुझे हिंदी समझ में नहीं आ रही, please मुझे सिखा दो स्कूल के टाइम पे. And I'm talking about the 80s and the 90s when I was in school. And she would explain to me, and then, she would always grumble and say that, बिल्कुल गलत हिंदी सिखा रहे हैं तुमको. And towards my board exams, it was literally that I had to do the wrong thing just because that's how it's taught in schools and that's part of the boards. And that really would upset her. She was a linguist, she had studied Hindi. Then along the years, she was very particular about the food. So as her son, I had to bear, and my father too, we had to bear the brunt of it. All the experiments in food would happen on us. And then she would also be very particular about, she would also be particular about the nutrition. And दाल में कुछ काला तो ऐसा था कि जब काली दाल ऑर्डर करते थे तो वो पूरी दाल ही काली होती थी. So she discovered, and she always said कि बाहर की दाल मत खाना, सिर्फ ऑर्गेनिक खाना, because इसमें ये लोग काला रंग डालते हैं. It's only now that, when foreign countries highlight that your masalas are adulterated, in the 80s and 90s she would be highlighting this, कि ये दाल भिगो दी सारी पानी काला हो गया. And which is the second link to dal mein kala. Anyway, as a person, she could not see something wrong and be quiet about it. She had to raise the issue, whether it's with the person in front of her or if it needed to go to the authorities, whether it was, we had a circus behind our house. There was a big field, and one time this circus came in, and again this is in the 80s, and they had all kinds of wild animals, a hippopotamus and so many other animals. And she was so offended, so particular about it. She didn't know what is the right way to approach this, but she took up a fight with the circus wala. Not literally, but through authorities. She went to the police, she went to the authorities that how can you allow wildlife to be used by these circus people. She once told the driver to chase a police van which had jumped the red light. There was this ad, I'm sure most of us would remember in those times, Sunday ho ya Monday, roz khaye ande. Right? I'm coming back to dal again. She did this whole research in those times looking at government figures from APMC and PUSA and whatever the government authorities that published these figures, that it is much more resource efficient to provide nutrition to the Indian population with dal rather than something which is resource intensive and which is meat or egg based. So raising poultry is far more resource incentive than providing dal. And she had, I would see all this, I would hear all this at home that, the government is not investing enough acreage in dal and is instead investing more on poultry farming. And now you put it in the context of climate change. Even in those times, she would tell me that she had read somewhere that, far less water is needed to grow grains than it is to produce a pound of meat. And again, the only context here is that this is all in times when, there was no internet, there was no awareness, there was no talk of climate change, global warming, etc. And she had once said that, told me that, the Indian meal, the traditional food for vegetarians is wholesome because it has all the amino acids. So maybe dal itself is not a complete source of protein, maybe roti is not, but when you eat it together, you're eating all the amino acids. But putting all this in context, she was the Akela Chana who proved that, Akela Chana kuch kar sakta hai. She even started her own organic farm. And then Kali Dal going forward, I had my board exams. I got very low marks in maths, and that was it. That was the start of another journey that, 30 years now it's been going on. So that was another place where puri dal kali thi, and we'll hear much more about it. Her final dream was to have a school on a farm. She wanted kids to grow close to nature, grow along with the crops, and be close to the earth. So I'll stop here, and we hope to hear much more from our speakers today. Thank you.
But you could read right now. I think you can. Why not? Please. There is a message from Krishna Kumarji which he would like to read.
So Krishna Kumarji, Professor Krishna Kumar, who was former director of NCRT and he's been professor at DU, he had written an article in the Indian Express recently. He wasn't aware that she had passed, and that's why it was a few weeks ago. I'll just read some excerpts from there. He titled the article, "A Parent Who Championed All Children." With the passing away of Kusum Jain recently, Delhi has lost a fighter for children. She chose her own fight path and stayed true to its direction. Troubled by the many injustices that school children suffer in our system, she founded the organization called Parents Forums for Meaningful Education. What power could Kusum Jain wield? To seek justice for school children, she approached the courts. Her fight was never easy. I remember Kusum asking parents to stand by their children, but parents were reluctant to pursue a complaint simply because they did not want to antagonize the school. In a major case, PFME succeeded in challenging the existing rule that permitted corporal punishment. Kusum was of course aware that legal victories have to be supplemented by reforms in teacher training and school administration. She has died, but her angry voice will always resonate in my ears, representing the civic conscience hurt by the violent treatment of school children. Exams constitute another domain of dark secrecy. Boards resemble Kafka's castle. Bylaws permit the regime of confidentiality at every step in the context of exams. Kusum Jain took on this hardened system and challenged the bylaws. In this difficult terrain too, she strode with firm resolve. There are two seasons when parents get worked up, at the time of admission and then at the end of the session during the final exam. When a child has successfully negotiated the boards, the average parent bids farewell to the dream of systemic reform. Kusum Jain lived that dream day and night, in health and in sickness. Her feisty spirit and modest demeanor will remain a treasured and inspiring memory.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kusumji will be long remembered as a fearless reformer, a compassionate social rebel who gave highest priority to meaningful education and flawless, fair assessment. Who knows this more than Sharda ji, who always stood by her and constantly fought all the battles and is continuing the same for creating more equitable and inclusive world for future generation. I'll request Sharda ji to share his remembrances and all the work that he did with her. And after Sharda ji, Manjari ji will be addressing us, and that will be followed by Aparna ji's talk. Thank you. Sharda ji, please.
Hello, I'm audible to everybody at this volume? Good evening, friends. We have all been companions of a never say die spirit. It is said that spirits never die, it is the body that leaves the spirit. That body having left the spirit doesn't mean it has died. It is alive, so I wish Kusumji personally and on behalf of everyone a very happy birthday. Let her spirit know that for us as persons and a society, if it really concerned about its future, will give a resounding applause to her on her birthday so that her spirit really feels energized. For those who live in the hearts of others, for those who live in the imagination of others only live, others are more dead than alive. I had the opportunity to be face to face with her in a meeting like this. Only I was in the audience and she was at the podium. In her own spirited way, she was ridiculing the courts, the educationists, the teachers who examined the marking schemes, who examined and checked and evaluated the papers, question papers, answer sheets. And she was saying that their absence of total heart in that. The time efforts of a child for 12 years, firstly, put to a test on the basis of a 3 hours examination. Thereafter, on the basis of evaluation which clearly indicated that some questions and answers were not checked. And having taken that to the court in the 2 years before that, she found that there was no redress, effectively. From the audience, she got the response that if you have not met a lawyer of that type, then please don't generalize humans acting in various capacities. And from there on, fortunately, the Parents Forum for Meaningful Education, she and her spirited, as I would say, housewives, all learned lecturers, professors, and educationists, teacher educators, they approached, the matter was taken to the High Court. You will be surprised that there was an occasion, there was a time prior to that when CBSE offered her to be the member of the CBSE, which is the usual offer, which is currently valid even to this day. When you can't beat them, offer them to join you. The question which comes here is, we are together here to relate with her in her spirit. She was an indomitable spirit. She would not take a perspective unless reasoned, because she was never touch an issue unless she had herself tested it out, deliberated with her team and come to the conclusion that yes, it is a part of a reality. There may be 10 perspectives of a reality is another issue. So if somebody tried to tell her that no, it cannot be and it has to be compartmentalized in a particular way to understand how things can proceed together, she would say there is no point in proceeding forward if the delivery is not there. She would go to the teacher of her child, Sugat, and tell that teacher that, look, my son will give an answer which he wants. Why should he give an answer that you want him to give? And he scored well. It's not that he could not give an answer, but that spirit was ingrained. He inherited that spirit, and I trust and I hope he lives that. And what was she after? What is the point of each one of us earning money and earning name and earning everything when our children will not get proper education? It concerns all of us. She did not live for herself. She did not fight for herself. She fought for a society of which she felt Vasudev Kutumbakam. If one is sad, if one has been let down, there can't be happiness in the family. This spirit with which she pursued carried her not only in Delhi. Globally, 7 countries brought in a no corporal punishment to their children in their schools after what she did for the children here. Even outside Delhi, in all the places, though corporal punishment is still happening, but it's a crime today. If somebody beats a child, that person has to face Section 323 at least. And in RTE, Section 17, it now contains no physical or psychological or mental infliction of punishment on any child. From where did it come? It came from those efforts and she lived for it, she energized it, and she was the reason that it came here as a reality. This is the change that she brought about. These are the kind of changes she pursued. She would put all the dal into a particular container and let it be there overnight to see that it leaves any color or not, and that would turn out. All of us here, if we are really concerned about that spirit to keep it alive, we must raise a voice. That would be the real tribute, and that would be the real remembrance, because ultimately we are the beneficiaries of all that. I have seen somebody, a top-notch lawyer in the country, saying that these are bunch of housewives. She stood up, the matter was taken, and ultimately another top-notch lawyer appeared for him to save him. But they apologized, because it was narrated to them. Mahatma Gandhi's wife, housewife. Every mother is a housewife. Because when she's tending to her child, she's not going to office. She's not thinking about office. So how can you use such a nomenclature for somebody who is actually energizing and doing good for your society as a whole? That's the spirit she had. She would at times be taken as some person who would not listen to any dissent, who would simply not listen to anything. But my experience with her has been, she knew what she was talking about. She came across as a person who had thoroughly researched it also. But if ever she was told that it should be done in this way without reason or without reasoning, she would say, no, it doesn't work that way, because it's not about us. It's about the society at large. The people who have to benefit are invisible. So how can we go? So that one aspect, I use the word indomitable spirit. And such a spirit lives on always. On the question of so many other multifaceted forms, the child rights that she understood not only found acceptance in that judgment passed by Justice Anil Dev Singh and Dr. Mukund Sharma, where her spirit, where her ideas, where her inputs brought about the recognition of a fact that every human, every being has got an aura, and that aura can't be invaded. And if we look at it, if we stop corporal punishment at that age, the court said, if we can't touch a terrorist when he's in custody, how can we expose the child to such thoughtlessness? When the child is in the custody, that also as a loco parentis of a teacher within a closed classroom door. This type of a espousing of causes which are so multifaceted and so vastly impacting the future of an entire generation or entire nation is what she thought about, it what she brought before everybody. And I remember once I asked a small question from her, that how can we show that this particular thing is so important and so critical for a society that seeks to evolve on very bright minds. She brought a book where in 1980 she said that book wrote, if we want America to be safe, and if we don't want that America should disintegrate, then it has to be ensured that we start with our children. Because their education system at that time was very much in peril, and they had established a committee which was to suggest ways and means to bring about changes, necessary reforms. And the title of that report was A Nation in Peril. And they had mentioned therein, if this type of education system had been brought on us, by another friendly nation state, we would have considered it as an act of war on the United States of America. This one particular aspect, you look at it, today what we need as spirited, I see all the educational luminaries here, I can see all of them, I know they are educating the teachers who educate our children. Is not this right tribute to this spirit which is here, to whom we just wished a happy birthday? We start with the fact that why is it that with every change in political power, we have a change in the political ideology and education in the country? What are we? Are we going to be silent spectators to this? I am not wanting this to be a political statement, because today you peel an orange, it becomes a political issue. But what I am saying is this how we need to shape our country? And how do we deny that if we don't tend to our children at that level? Our future is writ large, dark. You can't expect anything. You will only have yes, 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 nothing else. So it is in this aspect, it is in this thought process that she energized. And this is the action-oriented spirit that she ignited, where even if we are very selfish, we must work for our own self. We can't be silently walking into, as if all into the valley of death rode the 600. No, this was not her spirit. This is what she was against, but in a very, very non-violent manner. Not asking anybody to come on the roads to fight, because we are not at fight with anybody. We are at war with our own selves. We have to win this war of hesitation. Corporal punishment was abolished to unleash that spirit of fearlessness, but not without reason, not with violence, not with anger, but simply because truth, when it comes face to face, at least we must have the courtesy to accept it and then to see that it spreads everywhere. That is the message she brought up. That is the message which enabled us to feel strong, feel worthy, feel necessary to support, because ultimately she was fighting for us, not for anybody else. And to mention her without mentioning Dhanesh ji would not be complete. In Dhanesh ji's company, she had absolute acceptance. I remember, even in these places, she would come, and if there was something wrong in an order served, she would very politely talk to the people making the service. And all through, Dinesh ji would be silently looking at her and admiring her silently. He had so much of unfiltered love for her. And he had such a pious corner in his heart for her that maybe if we look at them together, the message that comes across is children must have unconditional acceptance. And then you see how they prosper, and then you see how they bring it about to reality for the society, for themselves. And on that note, wishing everybody to mark and remember that spirit, and then to see how you can do something within the framework, but not accepting the framework simply because it is given to you. Otherwise, we would never have the India that we have now. We were ruled since ages, 200 years, 300 years by the Mughals, then by the British, and then by our own. We brought about this change, the people of India. And if we are now to be told that people of India have brought, but this is what it is all about, then we have to ask ourselves, is it so? Are we right? As this is right, and let us see what is right. We must do it. That was and is and will always be the spirit with which he lived. And spirits, my friends, don't die. And if we really are here as a mark of tribute for her, for a mark of tribute that she is remembered always, but not only in mind but in action, we are all together. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. I think Sharda ji's very spirited acknowledgement of the qualities that we are here to remember and celebrate speak volumes about how we've all looked up to her and continue to expect guidance and support in all the tasks that she's taken up. Today, I'm going to talk very briefly about one area where she gave a lot of her energy, which was education. And in looking at education, her main thrust of what she was trying to focus on was the idea that children seem to be voiceless in the larger society as such, and we all need to recognize that they are the future citizenry of this country, and all that needs to be done to take up their cause needs to be handled with extreme care and caution, which sometimes she in particular found lacking. First, I'll just very briefly talk about the group of people, the Parents Forum for Meaningful Education, which came together formally over 3 decades back, I think 35 years ago, where what was essentially the core of the idea was to fight for the gross injustices, fight against the gross injustices which were being inflicted on the children in the name of education. So the fact that this was essentially a group of like-minded individuals who came together and can be called the founder members, and I would like to do justice to the fact that as a group, Kusum was there for a long period, but the others also who have taken up these similar issues included Dr. Kavita Sharma, Ms. Sampu Ranjit, Ms. Mari Juneja, Dr. Sanaya Nariman, Jaya Banerjee, Shyam Murjani, Atiya Zaidi, and Ms. Nirlesh Gupta. I hope I have gotten all the names. If I have not, I apologize, because I may be not clear about some of the names that were there. But over time, a lot of people joined in as life members, as annual members. And I think the idea that they coalesced around was this idea that parents as such need to be the voice for these children, and parents as such somehow are not being recognized as partners in the educational process. So we need to pick up these different tools which are available to us, whether it is at parent-teacher meets or even otherwise. How do we go about it can be very different. And I think she was one who really acknowledged the fact that it doesn't have to be one answer that will fit all situations and problems. We need to be able to recognize that it has to be taken up in different ways. The main idea was to look at how we can improve the educational system and provide inputs for our children, which would be providing some kind of long-term benefits, rather than looking at the short-term gains of marks, evaluation systems, which were so focused on the idea that the next step is looking for jobs, setting up careers, etc. So what I recognize is that doing justice when we're talking about this indomitable spirit, which Shardaji also talked about, which was Kusum, has to be, very multifaceted. So as I said, I'm taking up the educational part where I think her energies were really, seemed to be a bottomless pit kind of a thing, that she was able to find energy to take up and believe in causes and give it to her all, despite the fact that they may be poles apart, seemingly poles apart. But she believed in those causes and she took them up with great zeal. Her boundless energy was something that many of us admired, but found ourselves wanting. So she would really take up cudgels with us sometimes and scold us, cajole us into being more willing to participate in the long-term actions which were needed. Because as I think what Krishna Kumarji has said, that parents as such, or even society as such, tends to look at education as this long process, the beginning and the end part, where the admission and evaluation is something that you spend a lot of energy on, and the rest of it just happens. And so leave it to the teachers, leave it to the system to take care of it. So that is what may be something that we can look at unquestioningly, but when you start looking at the finer points, it is important to question and look for better ways of handling all those many problems which were emerging. Her single-minded devotion to the cause of children made her a crusader, the voice of our conscience, a reformist who doggedly fought and upheld the rights of children for a life with dignity. So that was something that we need to constantly remind ourselves, that this idea of dignity of all citizens, in particular children who are young, voiceless, at different junctures of their lives till they become adults, has to be taken up by the rest of society. Now I'll try to very briefly highlight some of the tasks that were taken up by the forum over the years, though it is somewhat difficult to distinguish between the work taken up by the forum and the spearhead behind it, which was Kusum. In focusing on advocacy of relevant issues, the forum organized many seminars over the years, which were addressed by many luminaries in their different fields. Some of the topics which have been taken up over the years included one which was even before the forum itself came into being, which was, I was told, Shikshar Bhashai, which is the use of mother tongue. Shikshar Vahan, okay, vehicle of education, and the fact that this is, I think, the language borrowed from Tagore as such, and I think this was in the 80s that this seminar was organized, where luminaries such as Professor Krishna Kumar and if I start taking names, I think that will be very unfair, because many of the names are not available to me as such. So I'll just say that as early as the mid-80s, she was talking about the fact that mother tongue is very important to be the medium of instruction for young children. So that was something which started up as early as that. Examination as an evaluation, where experts lamented the fact that it is the tail, the exam, which is wagging the dog. And that is something that a lot of people took away from that. Now that, yes, we do need to recognize that the examination system, especially the board exams, have been made into such a large monolith that it cannot be touched or questioned. This was something that a lot of people talked about. This was, again, early 90s. The fact that rights of the child to education with dignity was the next. No. Okay, like I said, I mean, the intricacies of the issues, I think when we look at the idea that board exams, the issues were really very complex, and all those aspects were, yeah, absolutely. Those
People who gave everything to fight those cases.
Yeah, absolutely.
Never charged us anything.
No,
including typing or tape.
Well, you know, I think that is what is admirable about the fact that this was a crusade which was taken up. Different people joined us and have, I think, acknowledging that fact as a tough process is something which you're trying to do, but may not be able to do justice to all the intricacies right now. But as you're saying, the fact that that multiple sets of papers, the equivalencies was not being looked at, the fact that the marking scheme which was being prepared had flaws in it, the way it was being used for correction had again major flaws in it. All these were things which were taken up, and when it could not be, pointed out or just talked about, we had to resort to the courts. And that is when, I mean, in different ways, it started with the examination system and moved on to recognizing that the intrinsic part of the classroom, that, day-to-day interactions, was mired in violence when we talk about corporal punishment. So that is where corporal punishment came in as a very big issue, and I think it was a long battle, and the war, one can say, is partially this thing that, yes, we got a ruling, but the part that which we recognize is that it needs to be implemented and administered properly, which we are still looking forward to and taking up in different ways even now.
Also, Manjari, one more thing, that it was discovered in that matter which took place, that the total syllabus as per the CBSE guidelines could be achieved only in 210 days of working days for instructional transaction, whereas as per their own holiday chart, the number of school days was 180, which Kusum Ji sat with us and she worked out. Actual instructional time available was only 80 days. And your children and my children were being put to this guillotine of their life chances and telling us that they are good for nothing. Stamped like this, 65% average failure rate. Still true, though disguised. And now class 3 examination, class 5 examination, class 10 examination to cipher the chaff from the cultivated wheat in the name of education. That is your children's future and my grandchildren's future. Choice is yours. Maybe you made a lot of money, but how will you make a good human being? These are the issues that cropped up from there. And you all did it. That is her spirit, that must live. Sorry for...
No, not at all. No, I think this is something that I think we, in the total process of trying to reminisce about
Parents
all the
Forum
entire...
has been, and that is the forum from where all this has been heard. You have been supported even in the matter of holding functions here by the IAC. I think ma'am was there at that time in charge about it.
Okay, I think there's so much depth to many of these topics that I'm taking up that we could really move off and continue to talk about those aspects. So I'll just very briefly again continue with this list of some of the topics that we've taken up. Alternatives to corporal punishment was one seminar that was taken up. Then we had inclusive education, which was taken up in collaboration with Amar Jyoti Foundation, where we looked at this idea that children with different difficulties need to be a part of the educational system, and how it is being done in places such as Amar Jyoti, and what needs to be done to recognize the importance of broad basing something like that. Parents as partners was another topic which was taken up during seminar, and the relevance and importance of continuous and comprehensive evaluation, which was one of the last seminars which was held right here in this room a few years back, where we talked about the fact that this was just before it was being done away with. The CCE program as such was being banished. And we all saw merit in that, and we had a lot of people who came in and talked about it, including, I think, we have Professor Anita Rampal right here, Poonam Batra, Professor Govinda, all had come in and talked about how important it was, but this was just, all that we continue to talk about, that CCE should not be banished, but unfortunately, not only was it banished, the next part of no detention policy up to class 8 has also been done away with, which was a part of the RTE as such. So, I mean, there are a lot of things that we've tried over the years to take on. Now, in this whole process of trying to recognize the importance of generating awareness and sensitization of the larger groups as such, these proceedings of many of these seminars were widely were published and disseminated to schools and other such agencies. The role of media in taking up this task was also tapped. Now, the fact that the concern and alarm which we felt about the prevalence of corporal punishment and the use of violence in educational system itself was shared with senior bureaucrats, politicians in various formalized meetings. And unfortunately, when we saw that there was general apathy that due to the entrenched beliefs which was cited, such as disciplining children is very important. The fact that spare the rod and spoil the child is something that a lot of people hold dear to their hearts. It seemed unsurmountable. And due to that, I think our filing the PIL, where we approached the courts and took up this idea of corporal punishment, which was ultimately banned and has been a hallmark of all the efforts that were taken up in different ways, needs to be recognized. We recognizing that this banishing corporal punishment or something that was taken up as a cause could be done through people such as who are part of the system, teachers. So very soon after that, we incorporated what was called a Teacher Who Makes a Difference award. And we approached schools to send in names of teachers whom they believed were playing stellar roles in trying to take on education in ways which were providing the kind of nurturance which would be beneficial to the young children and the way they were to become the future citizenry of our country. Now, the very fact that the nitty-gritty of all those the kind of programs where Teacher Who Makes a Difference award was, the criteria was set, a jury was also identified, the way different luminaries from different fields of, that they would be able to look at all these teachers and choose who were to be given these awards, etc., was being taken up in very minute, I think, details where her perfectionist, this thing used to be there that, no, we cannot take it up just because a particular way is being coming forward. Let us examine it in ways which are more cogent. So therefore, the idea that her spirit took on these very, I think, difficult and complex tasks in ways which were not very easily tackled by most of the common ways in which we try to do them, is something that we need to acknowledge. And I think the Parents Forum benefited from the way she took up these causes and continues to guide us, hopefully, in ways which will continue to influence our functioning. So thank you. I think I'll...
Scroll it down.
Okay.
Scroll down.
Okay. So I'm going to speak about how Kusum Jain impacted me as a journalist. So just 2 or 3 sentences about how education beat works in journalism. A set of government school teachers had already approached me and told me about students being segregated in classrooms, within classrooms, based on their ability and made to sit in separate classrooms. Now I was not being able to sell this idea as a story to an editor. That's a very important process that happens in journalism. And you must understand that in journalism, education is a very junior beat. It's given to interns. It's a city beat, it's a junior beat. And you are expected to do sensational stories like UPSC का topper कौन है, IIT JEE कितने लोगों ने crack किया. Then there's a TV news element where government school teachers are looked down upon. If the teacher is not able to teach well or is writing some nonsense on the blackboard, that is big news. It'll make it to the 9 o'clock bulletin. So as an education reporter, if you are reporting on something like students being made to sit separately in separate classrooms based on their ability, there are no takers. And in fact, one editor came back to me and said, "Isme kya badi baat hai?" I was also made to sit separately in DPS section E, and I was told I'm very untalented, and look where I am now. I mean, you are pitching to me. So I was, but you remembered it, didn't you? You still remember that you were made to sit in section E. And this was not even institutionalized. It was informal in DPS. It was just done informally. Now it had come to my notice, thanks to this group of teachers, that it was being institutionalized. It had been taking place in Delhi schools for 3 years and nobody knew about it. So children were segregated according to ability, and they were called, more or less, not used the name duffer, but slow or something like that, and made to sit in separate classrooms and taught through separate textbooks. So now I am, as a journalist, stuck कि अब ये story बेची कैसे जाए. And that's when I came across a tiny snippet. Is that the way I move it? Okay, just move it for me. So I came across a tiny snippet in Hindustan Times which mentioned that this policy of segregation was, it didn't have details, just a tiny paragraph. So I stumbled on Mrs. Kusum Jain in a very roundabout way. And when I eventually went to meet her, I found this posh civil lines house and Mrs. Jain in it. So as a journalist, I also have to, be slightly wary of saviors. The savior complex has to be avoided both in the source and the journalist. I'm no savior. I don't save people. I don't save. And neither do I allow my source to be a savior. But when I go to a source who's in a posh civil lines house, I am slightly wary that what is she going to give me that I don't already have. So I entered the civil lines house, and Mrs. Jain very proudly, in fact, told me that Kejriwal is her neighbor. And yeah, and she was taking on a Kejriwal policy. And she had something that is gold mine for a journalist, which is kagas. We need kagas to write. And she had kagas. She had this sheaf of paperwork which she had collected on this segregation of students, ability-based segregation of students, and she had made a file out of it, and she discussed it with me, and she talked to me about it, and it was like, again, I felt that she was quietly angry. And angry from a good place, you know. Again, the savior complex I didn't want. I didn't want a savior. You know, these children are voiceless. These experiments are always done on poor students. No rich DPS student goes through this ability-based segregation. It's very informal in DPS, and they're not taught through different textbooks. These experiments are always on government school students and on poor students. But again, I did not want a savior. And she wasn't. She was just quietly angry. How can they do this? She was just quietly angry. And that pleased me. That okay, she's coming from the right place. The heart is in the right place, and so is mine, because I'm no savior either, as I point out. I write and I move on. I don't think that I can save people or change government policy. Anyway, education policy is very, very slow to change. So once I met her, and I had, she was, as I point out, quietly angry, but angry enough to file a lawsuit against the Delhi government. And that lawsuit was, again, you know, it enabled me, the sheaf of papers she had collected, and the lawsuit enabled me to ask further questions. So I went to Shailendra Sharma, who was the principal secretary in the education department, paid, surprisingly, I found out a Pratham salary. Salary came from Pratham, but he was in charge. I met him in the old Vidhan Sabha, huge office. At least I didn't count his staff members, but huge staff he's sitting with. And I was able to sit down with him and said, एक lawsuit file किया गया है Delhi government के against. आप ability based segregation क्यों कर रहे हैं? And then the same set of government school teachers who had first approached me gave me research done by an intern teacher who found out that this ability-based segregation is having such an impact on students, they are not playing together anymore. The slow students are being called, tu rickshaw wala banega, and I'm not going to play with you because I'm too talented. And teachers have lost interest in this intern teacher. We are a research poor country. That's what Shobha Sinha told me, Professor Shobha Sinha, when I was doing the story. But this research came into my hands thanks to my good sources. And the research showed that, you know, peer learning is a very important thing. That isn't taking place. Students are not playing with each other. They're calling each other names. The student is now called the group name. ये विश्वास का लड़का है. विश्वास was the slowest group. इसके साथ नहीं खेलना. And then teachers have lost interest, and moreover, there are separate textbooks. So we even found out that teachers are giving less interesting activities to slow students, to students who they perceive as slow. So I was able to do that, all of that, because of Mrs. Kusum Jain's quiet anger, which had resulted in this lawsuit, because she had papers and she had filed that lawsuit, and ultimately she forced the government to file an affidavit in court, a sworn statement saying the government beat around the bush and said, you know, we are not really doing this, हम तो उसी classroom में ना अलग बिठा देते हैं. But that was not true. They were putting students in separate classrooms, and she challenged that. And now was forcing government to come. Governments, when have we forced governments to be defensive? And for the first time, the Delhi government, her own neighbor, with whom she shared this posh driveway or civil lines driveway, was on the defensive and had to come to court and say that we are putting students ability based, but we are putting them in the same classroom, which was not true. They were putting students based on ability in separate classrooms. And she was very angry about it. She said, how can this be done? How can you do this to students? Because now it's institutionalized, it's through separate textbooks, and you're also labeling students. You know, Professor Sinha told me, Shobha Sinha, that these labels stay with you for life, just as my editor remembered. मुझे सेक्शन ई में डाल दिया था, एंड उनके तो पेरेंट्स बड़े एम्पावर्ड थे, डीपीएस पेरेंट्स, सो ही बिकेम एन एडिटर. But a poor student who you are labeled for life as slow or duffer, or ये तो रिक्शा वाला बनेगा, as intern teacher Manish Kumar's research showed, then these labels stay for life with a poor student, and you simply can't do that. And I think ultimately the Kejriwal government was, in a later affidavit, if Mr. Sharda I'm correct, forced to say that they are withdrawing this scheme of ability-based segregation. And nowhere else in the world, yeah, absolutely.
They filed an affidavit. They have now filed. Earlier they gave a statement.
Okay.
That is on August 2023. That March 2023, that we have given up this system of this thing. We told the court that we do not accept this on the statement of the council. He said, okay. So court asked, is there anything else remaining? I said, yes. One thing remains. We have to see whether what they are saying is not being done in a different way. They had to file an affidavit. They filed it in November. They didn't serve it on us. So this matter is coming up on 26th of May, 24th of May. And there now we have found they have introduced a new system, level 1 and level 2.
Okay.
Like in your video games, level 1 is average, level 2 is from basic, and it goes on to. Now you know what is happening? They are making them sit in the same class. But in different rows.
Okay.
And the story is same. Good, bad, ugly means, and the worst part of it is, sorry, I am going little ahead. You know what has happened now? If suppose at class 3, that is the period in which they do all this, if suppose there was a backlog of children who could not be imparted the learning, who had been failed by the system not to be able to have a classroom environment. 3 years means 2017, so by 2020 it would have been over. How can it be that systemically in class 3, whenever they come, they have a deficit? So where is the problem? What are they hiding? Are they hiding that Pratham is being paid to remain in office? These questions will now arise when PFME will file their affidavit, which we are awaiting.
Okay.
And let us see where it takes us. But it is very important to understand one thing for our society. There is something very, very wrong. It seems 80% of the population of children is not factored in the future that is being doled out for everybody 40 years from now or 30 years from now. God knows where we are headed. Must be asked.
Yeah. Exactly.
I'm done.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. A wonderful intervention. So that was my association with Kusum Jain ji, that her quiet anger, which Professor Krishna Kumar also points out, was not just in vain. It led to a lawsuit. It put the Delhi government, her own neighbor, Kejriwal, on the defensive, because it's this ability-based segregation was done in the name of getting better results. Better results of what? Better results of exams. And then we further, I met lawyer Ashok Agarwal also, and he said they are pushing out poor performing students. They are failing them and then pushing them out. They don't give them readmission. So you're pushing out poor performing students, you are doing all these experiments, and she was brave enough to challenge that in a court of law. and therefore give me a story. Thanks.
One more small thing.
Yeah, please.
See, these words like poor performing children,
Yeah.
they should be banished when we talk of children. They can't come in same. What is this? Poor performing children. There are rich performing children.
Absolutely.
Thank you, all of you. We heard so much about malpractices in education and how she was fighting for this, and how an advocate, journalist, and educationist, everywhere involved with her. That was her persona. Kusumji's adventurous spirit and childlike quality that was eager to venture into unknown and broaden her horizon never failed to inspire many. Khichdi Project has been one of its kind. Shri B.N. Varma, founder Primus Books, will be sharing a lot on this, but due to poor vision is unable to read, and I request his wife, Dr. Promodini Varma, to read on his behalf, and later Varma ji will be here for the book launch. Promodini ji, please come.
Good evening, honored guests, Professor Pushpesh, Pant, speakers, and my colleagues at Ratnasagar and Primus. We are meeting today to honor Mrs. Kusum Jain, as well as release a book that was so dear to her and for which she worked tirelessly for years. Though I had worked at Primus for over 16 years, I didn't really know Mrs. Jain till about the very end of my time there. I was asked to start working with her on her book on the Khichdi. And then, what a revelation it was getting to know her. I soon found that she was very much like our founding managing director, Dr. Dhanesh Jain, a noble soul in the true sense of the word. She was also very meticulous and a stickler for details, all very useful qualities in an author, and which have led to the excellent product we have in her Khichdi book, a subject in which she had deep interest from her days in Pennsylvania. In fact, she was deeply interested in and very knowledgeable about food in general. I will never forget the evening we dined with her, Sugat Jain, and Professor Patrick Olivelle at the University of Texas and his wife right here at the IIC. The dinner had been advertised as a Turkish dinner, but there was really very little Turkish about the food. And Kusumji took the staff to task, which none of us had the confidence to do, for trying to pass off barfi, as she said, as baklava, and for not having Turkish coffee on the menu. The sort of effort she put into her book on Khichdi is amazing. First, she organized a Khichdi festival at the IIC in 2016, which was a resounding success. The feedback that she received from the festival made her realize that the subject had the potential of a full-length book. She soon started collecting recipes on the various types of khichdis which were prepared in different parts of the country. She also began to research on the khichdi in ancient Indian texts. The khichdi is basically an Indian dish and can be as rich as you want it to be or as simple and modest as you wish to make it, so that it is a dish fit for both the king and the commoner. It goes to Mrs. Jain's credit that she could take so simple a dish like the khichdi and turn it into a work of art, as few before her had done. I truly got to know Mrs. Jain when she was preparing the manuscript for printing. In spite of her failing eyesight, she would try and ferret out information from every possible source. Then, ably supported in the task by Ravi Dutt and Mrs. Goldy Malhotra, she would get the support staff to check and recheck the information before confirming it. This relentless checking and rechecking took a lot of her time, but she would not rest till she was fully satisfied. But the next step was even more difficult and demanding, that of organizing the material. Around this time, I had several meetings with her on the editorial and production issues of the book, and Kusumji would listen to my arguments patiently and would often concede the point I was trying to make. but there were also times when she would take a contrary stand and argue out her case vehemently. Often there would be a stalemate, and then one of us would see the other's point of view and we would reach a resolution. However, I must add that all this was done in a spirit of give and take, and she harbored no resentment on these issues, for she was as much interested in the looks of the page as the matter that was presented on it. Like a true scholar, she went over the proofs a dozen times in spite of her vision problems. The Khichdi book is here with us now, and we also have with us here the well-known food historian and a very knowledgeable expert on Indian food, Professor Pushpesh Pant, to do the honors in launching Kusum Ji's book. Allow me now to introduce our chief guest and celebrated author, who is both an acclaimed academic as well as a food critic and food historian. He has taught at Delhi University as well as at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, where he was Professor of International Relations and is the author of the acclaimed book, International Relations in the 21st Century. Professor Pant has also published over 20 books on food and travel, culture and religion. He has contributed columns on food in English and Hindi to newspapers and researched and anchored TV serials on food. He has also consulted with restaurants, hotels and food companies on flavors. Professor Pant's book, India the Cookbook, was named as one of the best cookbooks of the year 2011 by the New York Times. Professor Pant was awarded the Padma Shri in 2016. I now request Professor Pant to release the Khichdi book and give us his views on the subject.
After Professor Pant, you spoke so well. Speaking about Ramayana will always be good.
अगर आप मुझे इजाज़त देंगे तो मैं बैठ के बोलूँगा. मैं माफ़ी चाहता हूँ, मेरा घुटना बहुत दुख रहा है और खड़ा होना हिम्मत का काम. घुटने मैंने टेके नहीं है अभी मगर थोड़ी दिक्कत है. थोड़ा आप ये खिचड़ी का वो है तो मेरी बदकिस्मती ये है कि मैंने कुसुम जी को कभी इस तरह बहुत नज़दीक से देखा नहीं, पहचाना नहीं, जैसा आप में से ज़्यादातर लोगों ने किया है. मगर जब सुगत भाई ने बातचीत शुरू की और दाल में काला से जिक्र शुरू किया तो मुझे लगा कि जो मैं कर सकता हूँ शायद वो सिर्फ खिचड़ी पे बात कर सकता हूँ. और खिचड़ी मेरे लिए इज़ अ मेटाफर ऑफ लाइफ, एक ऐसा रूपक है जो पूरी ज़िंदगी की कहानी है. और मुझे लगता है कि अगर आप देखें तो दाल की बात बार बार सुगत भाई कर रहे थे कि हमारे खाने में दाल रोटी होती है या दाल भात होता है, और दाल भात में भी वही बैलेंसिंग है लाइसिन की, विटामिन्स की, प्रोटीन्स की, कार्बोहाइड्रेट्स की, स्टार्च की, जो खिचड़ी में भी है. अब यहाँ जो चर्चा अभी शाम को हुआ, it was fascinating because people talked about segregation in the classroom, they talked of hierarchies, and I'm very grateful to Shad Bhai sitting next to me who talked of riches and poverty in the classroom. I think khichdi ki badkismati ye hai ki it has also suffered from segregation in the kitchen and the dining room hall because of this feeling is poor man's food. The history has been traced so brilliantly in this book, meticulously researched, which takes you back to the Vedic times, which is of course the current season of the month, but let's not worry about that at all. But when it comes to Al-Baruni and Kitab al-Hind, it says कि हिंदुस्तान के लोगों का खाना is porridge consistency khichdi of lentils and rice. Now the poor did not know the science of balancing proteins and lysine and things of that kind, but they knew instinctively what was good for their body, nutrition, and it was there. Why I want to carry this theme a little further is कि अगर आप देखें तो खिचड़ी की बदकिस्मती ये भी है कि you make fun of खिचड़ी, कि अगर अब तो मेरे बाल बच्चे नहीं है, वरना जब सफ़ेद होने शुरू हुए थे तो दे वुड से सॉल्ट एंड पेपर, खिचड़ी बाल हो गए हैं आपके, मगर चलिए खिचड़ी इससे बेहतर थी. मगर द इंटरेस्टिंग पार्ट इज़ दिस कि खिचड़ी इज़ ट्रीटेड एज अ कॉन्स्पिरेसी. क्या खिचड़ी पका रहे हो, क्या खिचड़ी पक रही है. सो विच आई थिंक इज़ टू रन डाउन पुअर हिस्ट्री इज़ द इक्वलेंट ऑफ कि ज़िंदगी में और कुछ नहीं कर पाओगे, ये खिचड़ी है. You also do funny things to khichdi. You try to make khichdi the villain ki it is for the infants, it is for the infirm, it is for the aged. और बाकी लोगों के लिए तो उसमें it is insipid, उसमें तो कोई टेस्ट नहीं होता है. खिचड़ी is really the poor man's food who has no other options. You try to make a little difference at times because the poor have a self-respect. So they want to sublimate their khichdi by saying that is part of our worship. कि हम कहीं जाते हैं, and Kusum ji has done it brilliantly here. She has given small boxes कि cultural context of the खिचड़ी, कि पूजा के लिए खिचड़ी बनती है, संक्रांति के दिन खिचड़ी बनती है, पोंगल के दिन खिचड़ी बनती है. So you know wherever rice is eaten and lentils are eaten, you have खिचड़ी. मकर संक्रांति के दिन भी बनेगी, वो पोंगल के दिन भी बनेगी. मगर आप बद्रीनाथ में जाएंगे तो there are hot springs. You take a potli and do the खिचड़ी. Non-Brahman, again that's where the hierarchy of foods comes in. Untouchable will get the rites performed, the puja done, but the Brahman, the crooked one, the rich one, I belong to the same line, has the problem of not going back hungry from this house. So he would say कि नहीं भैया खिचड़ी का सामान तो बांट दे मेरे लिए, सीधा दे दे. तो उसको I remember from my early childhood in Hales, खिचड़ी का सामान दिया जाए. वो बेचारा जो दलित था वो खिचड़ी का सामान बामन के संग बांटता था कि ये दाल है, ये चावल है. एंड सडनली बिकॉज इट वाज नॉट कुक्ड, हिज टच डिड नॉट पोल्यूट इट. यू कुड टेक द डब्बे में घी भी ले जा सकते थे घर में, एंड इट वाज इनफ टू मेक अ रिच मील आउट ऑफ इट. द अदर थिंग विच अम्यूज मी वाज दिस कि खिचड़ी हैज अ सेंक्टिटी which we seem to overlook. You have an unbroken 700-800 years of tradition in Sri Jagannath temple in Puri, where khichdi is the part of the Naivedya and the Prasad. You have this, again, is brought out in this book brilliantly, in various Pushti Margi temples. And the only time I got a little shiver was when I was offered the chichi ki khichdi in one of the temples. Now, chichi ki khichdi is repulsive in a very different sense. I should be forgotten. I mean, we are so far not having blasphemy laws, so I shall probably survive this. The Lord, as a Bal Gopal, is fed something. And the poor Lord that day has an upset stomach in his avatar as a human being. So he has very loose motions. And this khichdi looks like that loose motions. So it needs a man with strong heart to have, or faith to consume this very happily. So this is one. The other thing is this, that, I feel a fool. When I read this book, it's been done so brilliantly that I think that I know so little. And the lady had done, I shared the book with my son when the copy came to us. And my son just went like a parochial pahadi to the section on Uttarakhand. And he came back to me and said, "Did you know the lady?" I said, "Barely, I can't claim to." She said, "She has done a wonderful job. She has got all the 3-4 khichadis from Uttarakhand just right. And if she has got pahadi khichadis right, she must have got the rest of them." बेचारा पहाड़ी तो मतलब वही ना, segregation का मारा है, बर्तन मलता है, waiter होता है, steward होता है. I'm just returned from Hong Kong. And it proved another theory, that wherever there is a tandoor in the world, from Chile to Barcelona to London to New York to Vancouver to British Columbia, तंदूर मैल करने वाला कुमाऊनी गढ़वाली नेपाली होता है. क्योंकि भट्टी होती है, कोयला गर्म होता है, बेकरी एयर कंडीशनड होती है, वहाँ वो लोग जाते हैं जो सेक्शन, जो लेवल 2 के थे, लेवल 1 के जो हम गुर्बत वाले लोग होते हैं, वो वहीं रहते हैं, तंदूर के पास खड़े रहते हैं. वो खिचड़ी पका रहे होते हैं बेचारे अपने खाने के लिए, वो तंदूर में मुर्ग और खिला रहे होते हैं लोगों को. Then I found a wonderful, there is a beautiful story about the Birbal ki khichdi here, which is the anecdote which probably is the right anecdote, if anecdotes are ever can be interpreted as facts, because the other interpretation of Birbal ki khichdi is very interesting. So far I had lived under the illusion, I will not take too much time, some khichdi will be awaiting us, I am sure. The story was that Prince Salim, who had not become Jahangir then, conquered Gujarat, which Akbar had failed to do so on his own, and he had not brought the complication of Anarkali by that time. So when he came back from Gujarat to Fatehpur Sikri, he was given a special treat of khichdi. Now what was the metaphor of khichdi? Gujarat mein, perish the thought, the Prime Minister loves khichdi. It has been a sub-regional national dish in Gujarat forever. So when khichdi was being cooked for Prince Salim, it was conveying the message that he has digested Gujarat now. वो खिचड़ी पचा गए थे, गुजरात खा ली थी उन्होंने. But this khichdi could not be the chichi ki khichdi. Obviously perished the thought. So what was being done, a very elaborate khichdi was being prepared, which Salma Hussain has in her emperor's table, called laziza. Now this laziza, perished the thought again, was a non-vegetarian khichdi. और उसमें meat भी था, dried fruits भी थे, nuts भी थे, and it took a long time to cook. And because Birbal was नाक के बाल थे साहब के, आजकल भी कई नाक के बाल नहीं, तो वो नाक के बाल को ही सौंपा गया, जो कुछ करोगे तुम ही करोगे, यू आर द संकट मोचन, यू आर द चाणक्य, यू आर एवरीथिंग, यू डू दिस फॉर अस. तो उन्होंने जो खिचड़ी पकाई उसमें बहुत देर लग गई, वो दम पे पका रहे थे, खिचड़ी में बहुत टाइम लगा. सो आई ऑलवेज थॉट कि दैट वाज द origin of the Birbal ki dam ki khichdi, but the story here is not as colorful but far more interesting. The other khichdi which should, I think, have been here is, I know there's the khichdi famous and favorite of Rumi, the Sufi poet, and which is the original vegetarian khichdi consumed by what we think कि अब तो ये कि आलू हिंदुओं का बकरा मुसलमानों का है, तो मतलब कैसे हो सकता है. तो उस खिचड़ी में काबुली चना था, जिसे अब आजकल एवरीथिंग इज पुलाव. Nobody aspires to eat a khichdi. I mean, unless you are trying to curry favor with you know who. हम तो सवेरे खिचड़ी खाते हैं, रात को खिचड़ी खाते हैं, सब आप जो खाते हैं हम खिलाते हैं, आप ही का दिया खिचड़ी का खाते हैं. So I think the problem is that काबुली पुलाव which goes by the name is, उसमें सूखी खुबानी है, उसमें सूखे अंजीर हैं, उसमें खजूर है, उसमें काबुली चना है, उसमें चावल है, and there was no meat because Rumi believed that a fakir should not be eating rich food and meat could not be wasted on a Sufi who was practicing Spartan ascetic life. So that is there. I'm amazed that 121 recipes from all over the country are here. I think what Kusum Ji has done brilliantly here is to provide a key to Indian culture. It celebrates the resplendent diversity of khichdi in our culture, and you get to know इस रीजन में क्या होता है. वो दूसरा है खिचड़ी के चार यार, दही मूली घी अचार या दही पापड़ घी अचार is almost reminds me of the whiskey के चार यार, खेल रिस्की था, whiskey ने किया बेड़ा पार. I think the interesting thing about khichdi is that khichdi made well can really do your beda par. It can be donning an avatar which could be the sick man's food, but it could be sublime, better than any biryani or pulao, and it can become aspirational dish. So I think the book deserves to be read, and I think it's been planned brilliantly, produced brilliantly. I mean, the other thing which my son, who cooks much better than I do, I mean, actually I'm lying, I don't cook at all. He cooks, and he cooks brilliantly. And he said, इस किताब में पहली बार मैंने ये देखा कि notes के लिए खाली पन्ने छोटे हुए हैं. So if you watch up something, you make corrections and do that. And I think the condiments are given, the accompaniments are given for different khichdi, the cultural context is given. This book, I think, does what, sir, you hopefully on the 24th may succeed in doing, do away with segregation. It tells you that how khichdi can be a simple but sublime dish, and you can change it according to your personal palate, taste and seasons. I can't add anything to it. I think it's almost a perfect book. This is the way it should be, and it put it to good use. Thank you.
दरअसल अगर हम ये कहें कि कुसुम जी की स्पिरिट की खासियत इतनी ज़बरदस्त है कि उन्होंने रंग खिचड़ी को राजा बना दिया.
बिल्कुल, क्या बात है.
Thanks for capturing it in that way.
Thank you so much. And it is always pleasure listening to Pant. It is always pleasure. And now our last speaker, Dr. Pulkit Mathur, a nutritionist who has gone through the book and has also given us a review. And how she views, she'll share with you. But when there was year of millets, she worked a lot on millets. And I'm sure she'll be able to share a lot more on khichdi from the nutritionist point of view.
Thank you so much, Dolly ji. Actually, I was really delighted when she came to Lady Irwin College and presented this book to me to review. It is a marvelous book. I mean, the whole idea of putting together recipes on something which is a food eaten throughout the country, and to bring out those nuances of how it varies from region to region. It is simply a brilliant idea, and when I went through the book, I was just simply delighted. It's not just a recipe book. It is offering you a delightful and wonderful journey into, the kinds of cuisines that are a part of our country. Usually we are just, familiar with what we eat in our own, around us, and maybe whatever is introduced into our region. And this book will actually take you to different parts of the country and show you how things can be very different. And here I'll just tell you a little incident which, my mother-in-law was also going through this recipe book, and the first thing, and she has lived her life in Bengal, in Calcutta. And she told me this incident which I really want to share with everyone, is that once she was unwell, and so she went to the doctor there in Kolkata. And so he generally asked that, okay, you're not feeling well, and, digestive issues and all that. So let me suggest to you what to eat. So she says, no, I'm having khichdi. And the doctor was like shocked. He says, no, you don't have khichdi. That is too heavy for you. And, so that's when she learned that the Bengali khichdi is actually a very, it's a dish which is served for a celebration, and it has a lot of rich ingredients in it, with bhajas, with different fried vegetables as accompaniments. And that's why the doctor was like shocked that you're going to eat khichdi, but coming from the north, you would, kind of think of khichdi as the dish to have when you're not feeling so good in the stomach. So that was I just wanted to narrate that incident, because we may think in the north that it's a humble dish, but as you travel the, country, you will realize that it is a celebratory dish. It is a dish which is cooked in a very rich manner in some of the regions of the country. And in fact, Kusum ji has actually beautifully encapsulated that whole diversity of the country. You will see different, in each state, you will see that there are, 4 to 5 different types of recipes. So within a state also it is eaten in different ways. Not only that, she has also put in some recipes across the world, which are, dishes which are similar in ingredients to khichdi and eaten in a similar way, which is very interesting, because you wouldn't think this is some dish which is eaten somewhere outside of our country as well. So that's a very interesting part of the book. Each of these recipes, what is very interesting is the local ingredients which are being used in each of these recipes, the cooking methods, and how much in detail these have been written in the book to help you to replicate, and if you would like to try out these recipes. Also notes on how culturally the whole dish is looked at. So that also tells us a lot about each region, which we wouldn't know by just simply looking at a recipe book. I especially like the description of the accompaniment. So, as the book mentioned about the char yar, that khichdi should be eaten with these things. In every region, there is a whole different list of accompaniments, and their recipes have also been shared in the book, which is a big thing, because otherwise you would not come to know about it. What is also very good in this recipe book is that at the end of the book, you have these pictures of all the ingredients. So a beginner, a student, if they are looking at these recipe books, many times, they would just not recognize the ingredients. And then this gives you a picture of that ingredient and, helps you recognize that what exactly is meant by this ingredient, because obviously across the country, there are so many ingredients, we wouldn't know perhaps what this is all about. As a nutritionist, I just want to share that, as has been also mentioned, this is khichdi is the perfect combination of the foods. We teach this to our first year students that, if you want to have that balanced meal which you're told about, it is a combination of 3 food groups. That is the cereal and the pulse and the vegetable. And you will find in most of these khichdi recipes that all these 3 food groups are there. So they make your complete meal. They make what is called the balanced diet, which includes, the energy-giving food, the body-building food, as well as the foods which will protect you from diseases. That's the vegetables which go into it, the spices which go into it. As has also been mentioned by Sugat also about the amino acids and the balancing. It is amazing how our ancestors, even before we came to know about amino acids and protein quality and how the two need to be eaten together, they just knew by how, perhaps the children were growing, or how how good you felt after having these foods in combinations. So these food combinations are a heritage to us, something that has been passed down by our ancestors. And as a nutritionist, we also encourage these kind of food combinations which give you balance of all the nutrients that you need to be healthy. Besides rice, which is in most of the recipes, you see that it is a rice and a dal, different dal combinations. There is this whole thing of, reviving the millets, which last year we celebrated the International Year of the Millets. And I feel it is important because somewhere down the line, maybe we can blame it on the Green Revolution, or we blame it on the, the Food Security Act, which then, just gives you the rice and the wheat for a very cheap price. Somehow our diets have changed over time, and we have lost out on these foods which were super grains. They were, so we don't have to rely on getting the super grains from all the way from South America to stay healthy, because all your, fancy recipes will all give you all these grains. But we look back into our own food and what we used to have, and you find that these millets were and actually are still a part of many of these traditional recipes which we need to revive. So I also see the book as, a revival of some of those recipes which maybe we have forgotten about with the passage of time. So the history, the significance of this food is something which needs to be revived, and I encourage everyone to go through this book, and especially, I definitely would recommend it to all our students of nutrition and of culinary science to do, go through these recipes. And I'm really looking forward to the book which is going to come out on rotis, because that's again one more universal food which is eaten across the world, and of course the variations that we will see in our own country. So thank you very much for having me here, and all the very best.
Thank you, all the speakers. Kusum ji was a captivating blend of adaptability, intellectual prowess, compassion, curiosity, and introspection. Her remarkable character has left a lasting impact and enduring influence that serves as a reminder of transformative power of empathy, education, and activism in creating a better world for tomorrow. Her words keep echoing in my ears. I have not gone. I have not gone. I'm still there. मैं कहीं नहीं गई हूँ. मैं बच्चों की किताबों पर काम कर रही हूँ. मैं कहीं नहीं गई हूँ. मैं उस बच्चे के साथ खड़ी हूँ जो स्कूल की पनिशमेंट से खौफजदा है. मैं उस माँ के पीछे खड़ी हूँ जो अपने बच्चे की टीचर से जवाब नहीं पा रही कि क्यों उसके बच्चे को फेल कर दिया गया है. मैं कहीं नहीं गई हूँ. मैं हर बेइंसाफ़ी की जंग में जूझ रही हूँ. मैं कहीं जा ही नहीं सकती. मैं हर व्यक्ति के दिल में हूँ जो मेरी सोच को आगे ले जा रहा है. She has not gone. She will continue to be here, live in the hearts who understand empathy and have dreams in their eyes. Nothing is ever over, and she has not gone. Once again, my sincere thanks to all the speakers who made the glimpses so vivid. Thank you, all of you, for sparing your Sunday evening to remember a noble soul. Thank you, Primus team and IIC team for organizing this event. I thank you all. Now it is formally closed, the function, but it's an open house. I believe some of her friends and associates would like to say something about her, so they may please say so. And I know Mr. S L Jain and Ms. Anita Rampal. They were there, they wanted to say something on her, how they were associated with her. They may kindly do so. Thank you. Hanji?
May I add a word?
Please.
You know, one thing excellent about Gitri, which is, I'm sure it will be in her book. I don't have the book, I haven't read the book. I want one. Is that it is not a humble meal. It is a life-saving meal for the housekeeper. A working woman, non-working woman, the pressure cooker is always ready in less than half an hour. You add what you want and the children are happy. You want to add desi ghee, it is available. You want to avoid desi ghee, it is okay. I think that one issue in today's work span is to be highlighted also. Thank you very much.
थैंक यू गोल्डी। मित्रों, कुसुम जी को मैं 1983 से जानता हूँ, जब वो मेरी ज़िंदगी में आए, एंड आई फील प्रिविलेज्ड दैट शी वाज पार्ट ऑफ माय लाइफ। और 1983 में इंडिया इंटरनेशनल सेंटर में ही उन्होंने एक सेमिनार किया था, जिसमें नर्सरी के बच्चों को एडमिशन करते हुए जो टेस्ट करते हैं, उस टेस्ट के बारे में। और हम नए नए हेड ऑफ़ स्कूल बने थे और दिल्ली पब्लिक स्कूल से आए थे, जिसका जिक्र यहाँ कई दफ़ा हुआ। और वही टेस्ट, बच्चे का इंटरव्यू करना, बच्चे से कविता सुनना, कलर देखना, ये करना वो करना और फेल कर देना। 1000 बच्चों में से 100 बच्चे के करीब छांट लेने। तो मुझे उनकी बात कोई समझ में ही ना आए। और जैसे आपने कहा अभी कि भाई डॉक्टर धनेश जैन से मैंने कहा, डॉक्टर साहब आप थोड़ा इंटरवीन करके थोड़ा मेरी तरफ बोलिए कि बच्चे का टेस्ट करना ज़रूरी है। लेकिन डॉक्टर धनेश जैन kept a distance and she supported silently डॉक्टर कुसुम जैन। तो उनका जो दृढ़ निश्चय था वो उनकी शक्ति थी। नंबर 2, उनके घर जब भी गए, जो एक्सपेरिमेंट किए, हमें वो एक्सपेरिमेंट नहीं, लेकिन जो चुकंदर की चीज़ें और अलग अलग तरह के जूसेस खाने को मिले, बहुत ही लजीज, बहुत ही लाजवाब चीज़ें मिली। हमें उनको कोई झेलना नहीं पड़ा कि भाई एक्सपेरिमेंटल स्टेज पे उन्होंने किया हो, जैसा अभी कुछ स्पीकर्स ने कहा। बड़ा एंजॉय किया। दूसरी चीज़ जो मैं अप्रिशिएट करता रहा वो ये कि उनके यहाँ हर चीज़ का डॉक्यूमेंटेशन होता था और हर चीज़ के बारे में रिसर्च पेपर और सारी चीज़ें उनको याद होती थी। और वो जब भी डॉक्यूमेंट निकाल के लाती थी, क्योंकि हम स्कूल में पढ़ाने वाले, हमें तो चीज़ें समझ में ही नहीं आती। आज भी मुश्किल जो आर्टिकल्स आते हैं अखबारों में, मैगजीन्स के अंदर, वो ऊपर से निकल जाते हैं, उनको समझना और फिर उनको याद रखना ये बिल्कुल मुश्किल बात है। और डॉक्टर कविता शर्मा के यहाँ कितनी मीटिंग्स हुई हमारी, कितनी चीज़ों के बारे में चर्चाएं हुई, डॉक्टर शारदा के ऑफिस के अंदर। तो ये सारी की सारी ऐसे यादें हैं जो हमारी ज़िंदगी को रिच बनाती हैं। और जैसे मैंने कहा कि हम वाकई बहुत बहुत भाग्यशाली हैं, तो उनके जीवन से प्रभावित हुई। कब वो आए, जिनसे कन्फ्रंटेशन हुई 83 में, फिर वो बड़ी बहन बनी और फिर गुरु बन गए। और सुगत की जो, जब हम मॉडल टाउन रहते थे वो शुरू में, तो इनकी बनाई हुई एक पेंटिंग इनके एंट्रेंस के दरवाजे पे उन्होंने लगाई हुई थी, सब देखें, ताकि अभी भी है वो। और फिर सिविल लाइंस में आए और केजरीवाल साहब की किस तरह से उनकी वजह से ट्रैफिक में और उनके अंदर जो प्रॉब्लम्स होती थी, और वो घंटों गवर्नमेंट स्कूलों के अंदर जाकर के सब जगह जाती थी। हमारे महावीर स्कूल के अंदर भी मेरे ख्याल से 100-150 दफ़ा वो आई होंगी, और टीचर्स के साथ और स्टूडेंट्स के साथ जो वर्कशॉप की, जी हाँ, वर्कशॉप भी की उन्होंने, और दूसरे प्रिंसिपल्स के ग्रुप में। लेकिन मैं फिर भी बड़ा दुर्भाग्य ये है कि जो चीज़ें कंटेम्प्रेरी हैं और हमारे आज से 30-40 साल पहले, 50 साल 60 साल पहले हो जानी चाहिए थी, वो आज भी नहीं हो रही हैं। और फ्यूचर के अंदर भी फ्यूचरिस्टिक अगर उनको कहें हैं तो वो कंटेम्प्रेरी आज के ज़माने की हैं और पीछे के ज़माने की हैं। लेकिन बहुत आशा नहीं नज़र आ रही है, बहुत ऐसी उम्मीद नहीं नज़र आ रही है। कोर्ट से हमें ज़रूर राहत मिल जाए, लेकिन बार बार जो नए एक्ट आ रहे हैं, नई पॉलिसीज़ आ रही हैं, उन नई पॉलिसीज़ के अंदर उन सब चीज़ों को निगेट किया जा रहा है। एनीवेज, बहुत अच्छा चर्चा हुई, बहुत अच्छी स्पीचेस सुनने को मिली, और हम सब आई फील एनरिच्ड पर्टिकुलरली बाय बीइंग हियर। थैंक यू एवरीवन, थैंक यू सुगत, थैंक यू गोल्डी जी एंड एवरीवन, थैंक यू वेरी मच।
मेरा नाम जे पी गुप्ता है। मैं सिर्फ इतना कहूँगा कि शायद यहाँ पर जितने लोग बैठे हैं उनमें सबसे पहले मैं डॉक्टर कुसुम जैन और धनेश जैन से मिला था 1968 में यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ पेंसिल्वेनिया में। और जो एक्सपेरिमेंटल खाने के बारे में बात हुई, लगभग 3 साल तक सप्ताह में 2 बार मैंने उनका एक्सपेरिमेंटल खाना खाया। उसके बाद फ्रीक्वेंसी कम हो गई क्योंकि मेरी शादी हो गई थी, वरना सप्ताह में 2 बार उनके यहाँ रेगुलर था मेरा खाना खाना, और बहुत एंजॉय किया। जो भी उन्होंने एक्सपेरिमेंट किया वो सब सक्सेसफुल रहे। उसके बाद फिर मॉडल टाउन में और सिविल लाइंस में कभी कभी जाना हुआ। उनसे मिलके हमेशा, उनसे और धनेश जी से मिलके बड़ी खुशी होती थी। लास्ट नवंबर में यहाँ पर जो कार्यक्रम हुआ था उसमें मिला। धन्यवाद।
थैंक यू सो मच। कुसुम जी से बड़ी यादें हैं। मेरी पहली मुलाकात ऐसी हुई कि एक लेटर टू द एडिटर था अबाउट द एग्ज़ाम सिस्टम ऑफ CBSE। मुझे खुद भी एज एन एजुकेटर, आई एम सॉरी टू से मोस्ट एजुकेटर्स डोंट इवन वरी अबाउट इट, बट मुझे जो है अच्छा लगा, तो मैंने कोशिश करी पता करूं कि ये है कौन। तो बड़े मुश्किल से ढूंढ ढांड के मुझे पता लगा, और फिर मैंने उनको फ़ोन किया। मैंने कहा कि आपसे मुलाकात होनी चाहिए। तब मैं छोटे से एक 1.5 कमरे के घर में कस्तूरबा गांधी मार्ग पे रहती थी। वो आए, फिर हमने चर्चा करी कि इसका हमको एक फॉर्मल रूप देना चाहिए, वी शुड फाइट फॉर दीज इश्यूज एंड ऑल ऑफ दैट। एंड आई स्टिल रिमेंबर माई आईज हैड स्वोलन अप एंड शी सेड आप इसका कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन ज़रूर लिख दीजिए। तो मैंने बैठ के, इन स्पाइट ऑफ द स्वोलन आईज, I made the constitution and she was very happy. She was very happy with it. हम लोगों ने बहुत लड़ाइयाँ लड़ी, and I won't forget Shyam Murjani because हम अब तो he is no longer in this world, but हम एक लॉयर से दूसरे लॉयर से तीसरे लॉयर से चौथे लॉयर, पता नहीं कितने वकीलों के पास गए। सबने कहा ये सब बेकार है, we are not going to spend time on it. He was the only one who said sky is the limit in law, I will fight it. अब वो जो, क्योंकि कुसुम जी बिंग कुसुम जी, ये वाला मुद्दा भी डाल दीजिए, ये भी डाल दीजिए, वो भी डाल दीजिए, करते कराते वो 90 पेज की ब्रीफ थी, एंड देन एनेक्स्चर्स उसके आगे थे. So I still remember I was in the court and he stood up and the judge said, by the sheer weight of this brief, I will admit this. तो बाद में वो मुझे बोले कि भाई आपको तो बोलना चाहिए था ना, एक एक मुद्दा एक बार में लड़िए, इकट्ठे कैसे लड़ सकते हैं. सो एनीवे, बट इट वाज, हाँ मेरे घर में बहुत मीटिंग्स होती थी, बट और जब मैं प्रिंसिपल बनी हिंदू कॉलेज की, तब लड्डू बटे थे CBSE के ऑफिस में कि कम से कम अब उनका सहयोग नहीं होगा ये briefs लिखने में. So, yeah, but that kind of brought to an end my very active participation in Parents Forum. I could not be both establishment and a revolutionary. So, and then the other thing that I used to often tell her, कि हम छोटे छोटे steps लें, क्योंकि आप इतना बड़ा मुद्दा उठाती हैं तो वो होने वाला नहीं है. और आज की तारीख में, in spite of all the efforts and all her sincerity and all her dynamism, system और ख़राब हुआ है. If you take the new education policy, instead of reducing the exams, we have exams right from grade 3. System और ख़राब हुआ है. हर जगह elimination हो गया है. And the issues are so different for the rural, for tier 2 cities, for poor, urban poor, rural poor. तो ये इतना complex issue है कि one size cannot fit everybody. So we have to take it. I always say education has to be decentralized. We go on centralizing it. और मेरा बस चले तो मैं boards बिल्कुल abolish कर दूँ. There is no need for boards. And finally, I used to discuss it with her. An exam is nothing but the accreditation of a student, right? We should not accredit the student, we should accredit the institution. कि भाई उस बच्चे ने एक तो इतना elite institution है और दूसरा इतना है. आपने तो, you have built in the inequality in that board exam. How can that be? Apart from the fact कि वो तीन घंटे में आप उसका कर रहे हैं, बट जो बच्चा जिसने कभी लैब नहीं देखी, जिसने के हाथ में कभी कंप्यूटर नहीं आया, वो बच्चा compete कर रहा है with somebody who has 1 computer per head and the most sophisticated labs. तो ये built in है. तो एक दिन MS स्वामीनाथन साहब को मैंने यहीं पे कहा, बोले आप क्या बात कर रही हैं, कहाँ तक लड़ेंगी, क्योंकि built in तो in the womb है, क्योंकि there are so many women who do not have nutrition. वो तो they give birth to children who are not mentally so developed. तो आप कहाँ तक लड़ेंगी? तो मैं खैर उनसे आगे क्या बहस करती, लेकिन सब लोग ऐसे नहीं है ना, जो हैं उनका तो उद्धार कर ही लो. So in that, Kusum ji was a crusading spirit. And when I became director here, I did what I could. Whenever she wanted, I said no, we will collaborate. Because that was all I could do. I could just not come and start revolution out here. So, but I don't think education world will forget her. I don't think her spirit will ever be forgotten, or should not be forgotten if we want to take things forward. Maybe a dose of pragmatism at a various steps, कि let us do this step, then carry on. But I don't know. She used to say कि फिर तो हमारा पूरा step कभी होगा ही नहीं. Maybe she was right. I don't know. So, but many a time I have spent, like she didn't want dissections for anatomy. And she would say कि computer पे it can be simulated. I said, Kusum ji, कौन से स्कूलों की बात कर रहे हैं आप? So, you know, the solution cannot be worse than the problem. Na? So anyway, we used to, but what was wonderful was to have those discussions. Was to sit and talk to each other and to sort it out and try to. हाँ? हाँ. क्या नहीं होता? हाँ, अब नहीं होता ना. जब हम बात कर रहे हैं तब तो हम 80s की बात कर रहे हैं ना. तो अब नहीं होता. I don't know what they do in rural schools and things like that, but I know colleges में तो होता है. Because once my zoology department came and said budget नहीं है, क्या करें? हमने इतने चूहे घूम रहे हैं इस कॉलेज में, आप पकड़ के उनको डिसाइड कर दीजिए और क्या करिएगा. But anyway, whatever be the factual position or otherwise, but what was the joy of it was the thinking discussion on issues of education, which many educators also don't think about. And that is where her spirit came forth. And as you said, never say die. And thank you so much. You were the last person left in the legal fraternity to carry on and on and on with it. Thank you so much, and I hope you will. Thank you. I know, that's why I said he just said he has a date. But उसके आगे भी
I am not doing it. In fact, I am very worried about my grandchildren. We all should be worried about them, and it is her spirit that keeps on energizing it. Anita Rampal ji se you were saying?
अनीता जी आप नहीं बोल रही?
No, उनके पास माइक गया ही नहीं. वो इनफैक्ट
उन्होंने हाथ खड़ा कर दिया था. She had to go क्योंकि लंबा हो गया ना.
हाँ जी, आप सभी को सादर नमन. मेरा इंट्रोडक्शन इतना है कि मैं कुसुम जी के यहाँ जाता था इंटरकॉम टेलीफोन ठीक करने के लिए उनके घर में. तो 18 साल पहले से मैंने उनके पास जाना शुरू किया. तो मेरी उनसे बातचीत हुई, धीरे धीरे मतलब बहुत ज़्यादा अच्छे क्लोज हो गए. तो उन्होंने मुझसे पूछा कि आपके घर में कोई बुज़ुर्ग हैं, मुझे खिचड़ी के बारे में डिस्कस करना है. तो खेत में गांव में मेरी ताई रहती है, मैं हरियाणा से हूँ. तो मेरी ताई को मैंने फ़ोन लगाया, मैंने कहा ताई आप बात कर लो. कहने लगे कौन है? मैंने कहा, अब उन्होंने फ़ोन पे फ़ोन लिया तो पूछा कि मैं इनकी दोस्त बोल रही हूँ. ताई और उनकी उम्र सेम है. कहने लगे बोलो बेटा. तो मेरे को पूछना है खिचड़ी के बारे में, खिचड़ी क्यों बनाते हो? तो मेरी ताई बोली गांव के अपने देश से भाषा में, भैया यूँ ही बना ले मैं जैसा मन करे, जब तेरे ताऊ कहवे जब बना ले वह. यूँ कहवे कि भाई पेट खराब है तो बना दो, या फिर पेट ठीक है आज बढ़िया मन है मूड है तो बना दो खिचड़ी. तो क्या क्या डालते हो? फिर सारा उन्होंने बताया ताई ने. 1 घंटे उनकी डिस्कस चली, बड़ी देर बात हुई, पूरा समझा, पूरा प्रोसेस समझा. फिर कहने लगी कि मैं गांव जाऊंगी मैडम, उनसे मिलूंगी. तो हमारी ताई कहने लगी ठीक है बेटा, राम राम, तू आ जाइयो, मैं तुझे पूरी खिचड़ी बना के दिखा दूंगी. हाँ, कैसे बनेगी, कैसी बनानी है. फिर उसके बाद जैन साहब चले गए तो मैं उनसे मिलने जाता था. बड़ा ज़्यादा उनसे वो था, उनके बारे में बताते थे वो हमेशा कि जैन साहब. तो फिर मैंने उनके कुछ शब्द सोचे, उनके बारे में सोचा. फिर उनके बाद मैंने थोड़ी सी लाइन लिखी. तो कुछ एक लाइनें हैं. मेरे वो चले गए अब मैं क्या करूं, वो मेरी शान थे, वो मेरी आन थे, वो मेरी सूरत थे, प्यार की मूरत थे. मेरे वो चले गए अब मैं क्या करूं. उनसे मैं जीती थी, सपनों को सीती थी, वो मेरे पानी थे, मैं उनकी मछली थी. वो मेरे चले गए अब मैं क्या करूं. प्यारे से दुश्मन थे, मैं उनसे लड़ती थी, वो सबके प्यारे थे, मैं उनसे भिड़ती थी. अक्सर मैडम लड़ती थी, उनसे खूब लड़ती थी और बहस काफ़ी होती थी. मेरे को भी बहुत डांटा जाता था कई बार कि मैं टेलीफोन का काम कर रहे आ रहा हूँ तो देरी से आ रहा हूँ. तो फिर मेरे से एक दिन बैठा के उन्होंने पूछा कि तुम ये बताओ कि मैंने बुलाया 3 दिन पहले, आए आ जाओ, अब तुम्हारी पिटाई करूँ? फिर मैंने कहा जी कर लो. तो मेरे से फिर उन्होंने दूसरा टॉपिक पूछा कि आपके घर में बच्चे हैं? मैंने कहा हाँ जी. तो पढ़ाते हो? मैंने कहा हाँ मैं पढ़ाता हूँ. कभी वाइफ नहीं पढ़ते तो फिर मैंने कहा गांव का आदमी हूँ तो सुताई घर पे आ जाता हूँ, दे थप्पड़ दे लात. तो मैंने सीधी भाषा में बोल दिया. कहने लगे तो अब आपका होएगा दे थप्पड़ दे लात, अब आपका होएगा, आपने मेरा काम नहीं करा, तब कैसा रहेगा. फिर उन्होंने मुझे बैठ के समझाया, खूब क्लास ली. मेरी वाइफ संस्कृत टीचर हैं, पढ़ाती हैं. तो उनके बारे में पूछा कि क्या वो भी पिटाई करती है स्कूल में? मैंने कहा हाँ. तो उनको भी लाओ. मैं उनको लेके गया. पहले तो मना कर दिया वाइफ ने, मैं नहीं जाऊँगी ऐसे लोगों से मिलने. मैंने कहा नहीं चलो, उन्होंने बुलाया है. तो उन्होंने बैठा के कई क्लासें ली उनकी, समझाया उनको. और उसके बाद इतना चेंज हुआ कि मेरा बेटा अभी बेंगलुरु में इंजीनियर है आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस में. तो वो मतलब मेरा दोस्त है. मतलब आज की डेट में मेरा कोई दोस्त नहीं है, मेरा बेटा मेरा दोस्त है सबसे ज़्यादा. तो आगे का है, वो मेरे श्याम थे, वो मेरे राम थे, मैं उनकी रुकमन थी, मैं उनकी सीता थी. मेरे वो चले गए अब मैं क्या करूं. उनसे मेरी मांग थी, उनसे ही बिंदिया थी, उनसे ही जगना था, उनसे ही नींदिया थी. मेरे वो चले गए अब मैं क्या करूं. उनके लिए सस्ती थी, उनके लिए संवरती थी, वो मेरे भगवान थे, उनको ही भजती थी. मेरे प्रभु चले गए अब मैं क्या करूं. वो मेरे लिए अमूल्य थे, मेरे लिए मूल्यवान थे. मैं सावित्री हो न सकी, वो मेरे सत्यवान थे. वो मेरे चले गए अब मैं क्या करूं. तो उन्होंने मुझे बताया था कि जब वो बुला रहे थे, जब उनके आखिरी कुछ सांस थे ना, तो मैं मतलब मिल नहीं पाई उनसे, जा नहीं पाई उनके करीब, थोड़ा सा टाइम गैप हो गया. तो मैंने लिखा है कि उन्होंने बुलाया था जब यम आया था, बचा ना सकी मैं यम से, पर उनको जाना था. मेरे वो चले गए अब मैं क्या करूं. मैं भी अब जाऊंगी, उनसे मिल पूछूंगी, तुम क्यों चले गए, अब मैं वहाँ क्या करती, ये मैंने लिखा।